It's our final game in charge of PAOK, and it's the last day of the season, and we're locked in a battle with local rivals Aris to see who will come second in the league. So we're winning our game 1-0, and that was enough to lift us back up to second place in the table, a spot we'd not been in for several weeks. But Aris have just taken the lead against Ike in their game in the 40th minute to move 2 points clear of us once more. So it's all eyes on the Aris result on this final day of the season. If Ike could do us a favour and come from a goal down and get a win, and we could hold on to our 1-0 lead here, then we could finish second in the table, qualifying PAOK for their highest league finish in quite a few seasons. And right at the start of the second half, we almost go 2-0 into the lead. Aris have added a second goal in their game, but Ike have just pulled one back, so they are still a goal behind. We need something special from Ike during the last 23 minutes of their game, and in our match, we're coming forward trying to add a second goal. We've looked a little bit laborious during this game. We've certainly had a much better final 6 games or so, as Aponza puts us 2-0 up. That should get us the win, but since we went out of Europe to RZ Alkmaar, pretty heartbreaking circumstances on reflection, we've looked an awful lot better. We've got unfit players back into the team, and we've also just benefited, I think, from a little bit more freshness from only having 1 game a week rather than 2. RZ Alkmaar went on to lose to Fiorentina in the semi-finals of the Europa Conference League. I think we'd have been hard-pressed to beat Fiorentina too. Would have been nice to at least have qualified for the semi-finals, but it wasn't to be. But we've had a bit of a resurgence. When we went out of Europe, we were locked on the same number of points of Panathinaikos in 4th place. You'll see we're now 12 points clear of Panathinaikos, but we are now 2 behind Aris because they are still a goal ahead against Ike Athens. It doesn't look like an equaliser or a winner for Ike is going to come. It might be that we're going to be consigned to 3rd place in the league. But there is that league table, and agonisingly, we are 2 points short of qualifying PAOK for the Champions League, something that their finances could really have done with because they're almost £1 million in debt. They would have been even more in debt if we hadn't sold off some squad players during the January transfer window. So we got close and we did recover, but it was ultimately in vain as we qualify them instead for the Conference League competition that they were in this season. If we show you our form since our last episode, you'll see that it's been pretty decent. We'll reverse the order of the fixtures so that they run up the screen. In that last episode, we were drawing 2-2 with RZ Alkmaar. We've not lost since that game. We won 1-0 against Panathinaikos, who are the team that we also played on the last day of the season. Ismail got the winner for us pretty early on in that game. We then had a superb win, 3-0 against Panathinaikos. Melida scored twice. Ismail scored again. We drew 0-0 with Aris in the derby in the next game. If we could have just found a winner in that game, we would have finished second ahead of them, but it wasn't to be. But we had a superb result. 3 games from the end of the season. We were at Olympiacos. After drawing that game with Aris, nothing short of a win would have kept us in the hunt for second, and we got that win despite having a man sent off pretty early on in the game. Maitian Melida equalised for us, and then very, very late in the game, Willington Aponza scored an 89th minute goal, and then we had another frustrating afternoon. It was a very even game against Ike. We drew it 0-0. If we could have got a result there, or a result against Aris, Champions League football was beckoning, but instead we win that final game of the season 2-0, goals from Sissoko and the one you saw through Aponza, and it meant that we had to settle for a 3rd place league finish. So at the end of our time with every club, we've given you a vote to decide which player you would like to track for the remainder of our career, and at some of our previous clubs it's been almost impossible to decide which 3 players to bring you. I think it's the same at PAOK, but for different reasons this time. At our previous clubs, we've had more than 3 standout players and some tough choices to make. At PAOK, I'm not sure whether we've had any standout players. We've had some reasonable performances, and after a little bit of deliberation, here's the 3 players that I'm going to pick, although I think one of them is head and shoulders above the others. Our first one is going to be Pedro Pereira, a player that's played at right wing back for us. He's managed to get himself out onto the pitch 27 times, although he has missed a little bit of the season through injury and suspension. He's not managed to score a goal for us in the league, but he has got 8 assists and an average rating of 7.23. And there's interest in him as well. Ludogorets are considering making a transfer bid for the 30-year-old Portuguese. So there's our first player, but our second is a little bit more difficult. I'm tempted by Oleg Ryabchuk, but he has really tailed off in the second part of the season. He's finished the campaign with just 5 assists. Most of those were during the first 15 games or so. So instead of him, I think we're going to go for our 6'4" midfielder, Ibrahima Sissoko, another 30-year-old and another player in demand. This time teams from Denmark, Portugal, Switzerland and Lorient are all interested. Some reasonable sized clubs in there. He's had a pretty consistent season. He's played in 28 games. He's managed to get himself 6 goals rushing on from midfield and 2 assists, an average rating of 7.34. And not that I'm trying to discourage or encourage you one way or the other, but the only player from PAOK I would really be voting for is Maïtzian Melida, who's had a pretty remarkable campaign considering how little he's played. He's had huge injury problems during the season. He's only made 17 league appearances. 16 of those were starts in a campaign of more than 30 games. Yet he's managed to get himself 15 goals, as well as 4 Player of the Match awards and 3 assists for his strike partners, and finished with an average rating of 7.51. Obviously, the choice is yours, but if you head over to the Communities tab now, you can all vote for Maïtzian Melida, and we'll see where he ends up with the rest of his career. And let's move on to our rundown of former players that you voted for. Duja Javorčić was our choice at Dugopolia, but he's just played his 3rd consecutive season of non-league football in Croatia. Patrick Lejiang is 35 years old now, but he's still Pironja's #1 keeper, having made 31 appearances this season. Peter Juritka is now on his 2nd team since leaving Górnik, having played in the top flight of Polish football for Korona. He's now back in his native Slovakia playing for Trenčín, but only 3 goals in 16 appearances and an average rating of less than 7 in a meagre season for PJ. And it was another tough campaign for Uwe Fürstenhofer, who spent his 2nd season at Borussia Dortmund, but rather than play for their 2nd team, he went out on loan to Paderborn, but only made 5 appearances in Bundesliga 2. And topping off a pretty miserable campaign all round is Alexandru Munteanu, who after a superb season during our double-winning campaign with Cluj, only made 12 appearances and didn't register a single goal. And if we catch up with how our teams did in their respective leagues, unfortunately, it was another disappointing finish for Dugopolia, coming 7th in the Croatian 2nd division. Pironja looked like they were flirting with relegation, only coming 10th in the Slovakian top division. It was a pretty quiet campaign for Benin. They didn't play many games, but they did beat Rwanda to make it through to the World Cup qualifiers. It was, however, a good season for Górnik. After last season's promotion, they managed to cling on to their top flight status, and they can build again ready for next year. And having never been relegated in their history, Austria Wien now looking at their 5th consecutive season playing in the Austrian 2nd division, having only finished 5th this campaign, their lowest finish yet, which left Cluj as our only former club that could bring us silverware, and unfortunately they finished 2nd this season behind FCSB, and their European campaign wasn't very strong either. They dropped out of the Champions League, having lost on aggregate to Molde. They got through 1 round of the Conference League before they lost to Irish opposition on penalties, meaning that it was ultimately a disappointing season all round for all of our former teams. All of which leads us to our managerial profile, and we have a reputation of 60%, and we're locked in there as a 3-star manager. We'd have won the league with PAOK, we might have stolen half a star, but we're now going to be wandering into the job market with the same reputation that we had last summer. And I think to improve this reputation further, we're going to have to try and win a competition that's got a higher reputation than our managerial rep is. So we need to find a 3.5-star league and try and win it. That's going to be a challenge, and there's not many jobs available that might provide us with the opportunity to challenge for honours. Leicester City have just sacked their boss in the Premier League. Elsewhere, Crystal Palace are without a manager, but they've just been relegated. Otherwise, there seems to be a bit of a lack of jobs at clubs that might be able to challenge in some of the leagues that might provide us with a boost of our reputation. This all means that we're going to have a very busy summer applying for the few jobs that become available in countries that we're interested in. Maybe Belgium, Portugal, the Netherlands, perhaps. We've still not been to Denmark or to Turkey. All of these leagues sound attractive if we can find the right club. But if you're looking for a new club for your own Football Manager adventures, then this video might interest you. It's going to have some suggestions for clubs that you could manage in your next Football Manager adventure.